It was supposed to be delivered a decade ago, and it should have stayed lost. That's how I want to start this, because the truth is, if I ease you in, you'll think I'm exaggerating. You'll think this is one of those creepypasta setups where some guy pretends to have stumbled across a cursed VHS tape. But I'm not pretending. I'm sitting here staring at a box that should have been buried under the dust of the past, yet somehow it found me. And if I don't tell you how it got here, you might not believe what happens when you open something that was never meant to arrive. It started as the most ordinary day imaginable. Groceries on the counter, email spam piling up, the mail carrier dropping the usual stack of bills, coupons, and meaningless paper I'd toss into the recycling without even looking. My life was, how do I put this, comfortably boring. I craved routine, the safety of it. Nothing out of the ordinary had ever happened on this street, in this neighborhood. And then I noticed it. A box wedged awkwardly behind the mailbox, as though someone had left it there in a rush, not caring if I'd even notice. It wasn't new. The cardboard was yellowed, edges soft, the way paper looks when it's soaked and dried a dozen times. A package this worn had no business being delivered today. At first, I thought it was a mistake, something the mailman had dragged out of the back of his truck after months of neglect. But the label said otherwise. My name, my address, my handwriting. That's what froze me, because the sender's information was me. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe one of my friends had pulled a prank, maybe stolen an old notebook where I'd scrawled my address. But then I saw the postmark. 2015. Not a typo, not faded ink I was misreading. A clear, bold date. 10 years earlier. My mind did backflips trying to rationalize it. Lost mail in some forgotten postal warehouse? A mix-up in the system. But none of that explained why it had my handwriting on it, why I couldn't remember ever mailing anything to myself, and especially why, when I picked it up, I swear it pulsed in my hands like a heartbeat. The weight wasn't much, maybe the size of a shoebox, but it carried a heaviness that pressed against my chest. The tape was brittle, cracked, but I swear I saw faint markings under the adhesive, symbols scratched into the cardboard before it was sealed. I set it down on the kitchen table, and for a moment the air seemed to change. You ever walk into a room and realize it's just a little too quiet, a little too still, like the walls are holding their breath? That's what it felt like. My fridge wasn't humming. The clock had stopped ticking. I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. Here's the part you need to remember. I could have stopped there. I could have taken that box straight outside, tossed it in the dumpster, and gone on with my life. But curiosity is cruel. Curiosity whispers, what if it's nothing? What if it's something valuable? What if you're imagining all of this? And then another thought, one that's been clawing at me ever since. What if it was always meant to find me? If I knew what was inside, I would have burned it immediately. I would have drowned it in gasoline and watched the ashes scatter in the wind. Instead, I sat there, staring at the cracked tape, chewing the inside of my cheek, debating whether to pull it open. I know you're expecting me to tell you what was inside, but not yet, because even now, even after everything, part of me still wonders if opening it was the moment my life ended, or the moment it really began. I'll just say this, the box is still here, inches from me, and whether I open it or not, it feels like something inside is waiting. So, do you want to see what I saw? The tape on the box peeled away with a reluctant hiss, like skin being torn from old wounds. Every strip I pulled free left behind dark smudges on my fingers, as if the cardboard itself had been sweating. The smell hit me first, thick like mildew and rotting paper soaked in something metallic. You know the smell of pennies left in your palm too long? Imagine that mixed with the damp, sour stench of a flooded basement. It clung to me, sinking into my clothes. The box groaned when I lifted the flaps. For a second, I almost convinced myself not to look. My heart was hammering, palms slick, but curiosity, damn curiosity, pushed me further. Inside, layered in brittle yellow newspaper, were things that shouldn't have been together. The first object, an old burner phone, the kind of plastic flip phone you'd see in the early 2000s, scratched, cheap, scuffed along the edges. Nostalgia should have hit me, reminded me of my first phone, those days of Snake and polyphonic ringtones. But instead, I felt watched. The hinge squeaked when I picked it up, dust flaking off in my hands. Next, a VHS tape. Its black shell was warped at the corners as if it had been pressed against heat for too long. No label, no handwriting, just dull plastic with faint, almost claw-like scratches along one side. Then photographs, polaroids, about half a dozen, each with that faded off-color hue Polaroids get when they've sat too long in sunlight. Strangers stared back at me. Unsmiling faces, dimly lit rooms, people mid-turn as though the pictures had been taken without their consent. Some were blurred, others too sharp, their eyes reflecting the flash like startled animals. I flipped through them quickly, each one more unsettling than the last. None of them familiar. Not one. Yet, for reasons I couldn't explain, one of the faces made my stomach twist, the way a nightmare does when you try to wake but can't. And finally, at the bottom of the box, taped against the inner wall with black electrical tape, a USB stick. Plain, black, with faint white paint smudges along the side. The kind of nothing object you wouldn't look at twice. But I stared at it as if it was ticking, as if plugging it in might light a fuse. I couldn't stop. Something fluttered beneath the newspaper. At first, I thought it was an insect crawling out of the folds, but when I dug deeper, I found a note, creased, almost disintegrating. The ink had bled, but the words were legible. Property of... If found, do not use. No signature. No explanation, just that blacked-out name, like a government redaction. I laughed nervously, muttering to myself, real cute, someone's idea of a prank. But my voice cracked, betraying the fact that I didn't believe my own words. My hands were shaking when I flipped open the burner phone, and that's when my skin crawled. The screen lit up, a faint green glow, grainy pixels forming the old-school home screen, the battery icon, full. 10 years sealed in a cardboard coffin, and this thing still held a charge? My breath caught in my throat. That wasn't possible. Phones die in days, weeks at best, if unused. Not a decade. I pressed a button. The backlight flickered once, twice, before stabilizing. The contact list had only one entry, unknown. That's when the first shiver of dread coiled in my gut. This wasn't just some box of old junk. Someone had packed this deliberately, with care, as though they knew whoever found it would be me. I dropped the phone back on the table and rubbed my palms on my jeans, trying to shake the feeling. My eyes drifted back to the USB stick. It sat there, innocently, like bait. Every nerve in my body screamed at me not to plug it in. Not yet. The photographs stared up at me, faces frozen mid-expression, lips parted as if they were about to speak. The VHS tape leaned against the wall of the box, its weight undeniable. Old technology, dead formats, relics of another time. I should have felt nostalgic, maybe even amused. Instead, it all felt wrong, like opening a time capsule only to find something alive, waiting, buried inside. That note kept echoing in my mind. If found, do not use. But of course, I didn't listen. The phone still glowing beside me, the USB untouched for now, my eyes fell on the VHS. No label, no clue, just waiting. And against every instinct, against every warning bell blaring in my head, I slid the tape into the dusty player I hadn't touched in years. The screen lit up. Static. White noise. And then something else. The TV screen came alive with a burst of static, the kind that crackles like dry leaves crushed underfoot. The sound filled the room, a hollow hiss that made my chest tighten. I almost stopped it right there, almost. But I didn't. The image steadied. Grainy footage, tinted in that faint sepia hue of old tapes, slowly emerged. At first, I thought it was nothing, just a dark, shaky shot of a quiet street. No sound except the faint hum of the VHS player. The camera drifted lazily, panning across cracked sidewalks and a row of houses that tugged at something buried deep in my memory. I leaned forward. My throat went dry. I knew that street. The camera stilled across the road from a 2-story house with chipped blue paint and sagging shutters. My old house, the one I grew up in. I hadn't seen it in over a decade, not since I'd left for college. Yet here it was, flickering on the screen, preserved in all its flaws like a fossil trapped in amber. And then I noticed the timestamp burned into the corner of the footage, 07/16/2015, 1:13 a.m. My pulse spiked. That wasn't just a random date. That was the summer I turned 17, the summer I was still living there. The camera lingered on the house far too long, zooming slightly, shaky focus locking on the upstairs window. My window. The blinds were drawn but crooked, and through the slats, I could see the faintest glow of a desk lamp. My desk lamp. I felt my stomach twist. Whoever was holding that camera had been there, across the street, filming my house, filming me. I whispered to myself, no, 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 this isn't real. But the tape didn't care. The footage cut to another night, different timestamp, 07/18/2015, 2:04 a.m. The house again. My window again, but this time the blinds weren't closed all the way. The camera zoomed in, grainy pixels shifting until I saw myself. 17-year-old me, hunched over my desk, earphones in, oblivious to the world outside. I felt sick watching my own movements from a perspective I never knew existed. Every motion was documented. The way I tapped my pencil, the way I leaned back in my chair. Whoever was recording hadn't just stumbled onto my house. They had been watching me. I gripped the arm of my chair, nails digging in. Another cut, 07/22/2015, 3:37 a.m. This time, the camera didn't just watch. It moved, crossing the street. Closer, the frame jostled as footsteps crunched over gravel. My house loomed larger. My window filled the frame. I couldn't breathe. On screen, the blinds shifted slightly as if touched from the outside. My younger self was still at the desk, oblivious, headphones cocooning me in ignorance. I wanted to scream at the screen, to shout at that version of me, to turn around, to lock the damn window. But of course, I didn't. I couldn't. The camera steadied again, just inches from the glass. For a moment, the shot froze there, my oblivious teenage self perfectly framed in that rectangle of light. The tape crackled, warped for a few seconds, and I thought it had ended, but it hadn't. The image shifted one last time. Now, instead of the camera's perspective, the tape showed a single frame, the inside of my room. The angle was wrong, too high, as if shot from inside the room itself, facing down toward my bed. I could see the pillow, the posters on the wall, my messy pile of laundry on the chair. The timestamp glared in the corner. 07/23 2015, 4:12 a.m. And then, movement. A figure entered the frame. Tall, shoulders hunched, wearing a mask that looked like a warped porcelain face, features exaggerated into a frozen, unnatural smile. The masked figure walked right up to the camera. No, not the camera, the window, my window. The lens pressed close enough that the mask filled the screen. The footage cut to black. I sat there frozen, mouth dry, heart pounding. My reflection and the TV screen looked pale, hollow-eyed. I shouldn't have kept watching. God, I shouldn't have. But I had to know what was next. Because if the tape was real, if it wasn't some sick prank or elaborate fake, then maybe the USB would hold the answers. And against every screaming instinct inside me, I reached for it. The USB drive slid into the port with a faint click, and the screen flared to life. For a moment, I just stared at the directory that appeared. Its simplicity was worse than anything elaborate. 4 folders, neatly named, each marked by a year. 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, and then at the very bottom, 2025. My stomach dropped. I told myself I'd start with the oldest. Maybe it was some deranged archival project. Maybe it would make sense if I worked backward. But my hand was shaking on the mouse. My chest felt tight, like opening these files was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But of course, I didn't. I couldn't. Inside 2012, dozens of text files and low-res images. The text files were formatted like logs, time-stamped notes, entries every few days, sometimes every few hours. At first, they seemed boring. Grocery lists, weather observations. But then, halfway down the scroll, 10/03, 2012, subject seen walking home alone. Noticed limp on left foot, possible sprain. Will monitor. My blood ran cold. The subject was me. There were pictures too. Grainy telephoto shots of me at 12 years old, walking home from school, sitting on a swing at the park, carrying my backpack. None of these pictures were taken with my knowledge. Someone had been documenting my life since middle school. I clicked into 2013. More logs, more photos. But now the files included PDFs, medical records, scans of my pediatric checkups, immunization history, prescriptions my parents had picked up. I didn't even know some of this information. How had they gotten it? Then came the emails. Downloaded conversations between my parents, between teachers, even private exchanges I'd had with friends. Hacked, stolen, archived. My throat tightened as I scrolled through file after file, realizing there had never been a normal year in my life. Every moment, every piece of data cataloged and stored. By 2014, the files became stranger. Screenshots of websites with black backgrounds, crude forum posts from markets I recognized as the kind people whispered about on the dark web. Threads discussing inventory, drops, replacements. Most of it was incomprehensible, coded language, but then I saw my own initials in one post. User, blank.
Subject G: remains viable. Drop scheduled pending. Surveillance stable. Keeping him under watch. My stomach lurched. I whispered into the empty room, keeping me under watch?
I looked back at the camera, at you, because if anyone out there has ever seen usernames like Watcher01 or Binder, if any of you recognize these handles from old forums, you need to warn me. Tell me what they mean. Because I don't think these are random stalkers. I think this is bigger. And then I opened 2015. Inside, the logs were messier, faster. It was like something had changed. Alongside the surveillance notes and photos were entire conversations pulled from my teenage social media accounts, Facebook messages, Twitter DMs, texts I'd long forgotten, even arguments with my mom, word for word. And then one line buried in a surveillance log, 08/12/2015. Subject aware, window contact occurred. Adjust strategy, window contact. My chest seized. I thought back to the VHS tape, the mask at my window. It wasn't just imagery, it was logged, documented. I could feel sweat dripping down my back as I scrolled. Each file was a needle puncturing my timeline until I found a new folder nested at the bottom, pending drop. Inside, nothing but a text file. I clicked it open. The package will hold until delivery. I whispered to myself, the package, this package, 10 years late? I backed out, my hand trembling on the mouse. There was still one folder left, 2025. The others were history, long shadows cast over my childhood. But this was now. I sat there paralyzed. My reflection glared back at me from the monitor, pale and shaking. I could feel every beat of my heart in my throat. The cursor hovered over the folder, and against every desperate instinct screaming at me to stop, I clicked. When I clicked into the 2025 folder, I expected nothing. Or maybe some broken files, junk data left over from whoever created this twisted archive. But the second the folder opened, my heart stopped. There were images, dozens of them. And not just any images, photos of my apartment. I recognized the crooked frame above my couch, the pile of laundry I'd meant to fold, even the faint coffee ring on my desk. These weren't old. These weren't from some archive of my past. The timestamps confirmed it. Each photo was dated within the past 2 weeks. The most recent one, 3 days ago. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. My apartment was supposed to be locked, private, mine. Yet these photos were taken from angles only possible inside my walls. One was shot from the corner of my bedroom, exactly where no one but me ever stood. Another from behind my couch, where you'd need to crouch low as if hiding. And then I saw one that froze me completely. Me, asleep. The dim glow of my bedside lamp caught my face, slack with exhaustion. I don't remember leaving the light on, but the timestamp matched the exact night I'd woken up sweating, convinced I'd heard footsteps near my bed. I scrolled faster, panic clawing at my chest, until I saw a different kind of file. A single audio recording. A memo. My hand shook as I clicked play. Static. A low hum, mechanical. Then distortion, as if someone were speaking through water. And finally, clear enough to pierce through my skull, my name. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse hammered in my ears, a wild animal beating against its cage. I couldn't breathe. Someone had been here recently, and they'd left me a message. I stood up so fast my chair tipped. Every instinct screamed at me to check the locks, so I did. Front door, back door, every window latch, each one was intact, unmoved, which only made it worse. Because if they'd been inside, if they'd left that recording, then how had they entered without leaving a trace? I tore through the apartment like a man possessed, flinging open closets, pulling back the shower curtain, checking under the bed. Every shadow seemed too thick, every silence too heavy. For the first time in my life, the place I thought was safe felt alien, occupied. I sank back against the doorframe, sweat cold on my skin, as a thought colder than the air slid into my mind. What if the package hadn't really been delayed? What if it had never left? What if it had been here all along, biding its time, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? I pressed the heels of my palms into my eyes, fighting the spiraling panic. The USB still sat inside my laptop, humming faintly like a pulse. Those photos, those files, they weren't relics. They were warnings. And then, in the dead silence of my apartment, something broke the air. A sound that made every hair on my body stand on end. The old flip phone from the package, long dead tech that should have been useless, began to ring. The phone rang like a death knell, a sound that didn't belong in 2025, a shrill, tinny ringtone from a decade-old flip phone that should have been buried with the rest of obsolete tech. My stomach dropped. Caller ID, unknown. I just stood there, frozen, watching the tiny screen blink like a dying heartbeat. My thumb hovered. Rational me screamed, "Don't pick it up! Smash it! Throw it out the window!" But some darker part, the same part that opened the box, wanted to know, needed to know. I snapped it open. For a moment, nothing but dead air. Then a voice. It wasn't right. Too high. Too clear, yet warped like it was underwater. Childlike, but not a child. "You finally opened it." Click. Line dead. My blood iced over. The room seemed to tilt, the silence after the call louder than the ringtone itself. I stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring again, half hoping it wouldn't, half hoping it would. I did the one thing I shouldn't have. I called back. I staggered back. If they had footage this recent, it meant they weren't watching my apartment. They were watching me, right now. Mark shut the laptop with a snap, as if that would erase it. "Okay," he said, voice trembling under a forced calm. "So, you've got stalkers. Creepy, yes, but maybe hackers, right? Maybe some kind of spyware trick." But I knew better. This wasn't just hackers. Hackers don't send packages a decade late. Hackers don't film you before you know to fear them. Hackers don't make tapes of your childhood home. This was something older, organized, patient. The phrase from the logs rattled back into my head. The drop. How many other drops were out there? How many people opened packages they should have burned? Mark ran a hand through his hair. "So what, you think you're, part of some kind of experiment? A target list?" I didn't answer, because then we saw it. The Polaroid. It hadn't been on the table when I first dumped the box's contents, but there it was now, propped against the laptop like it had been waiting. Mark picked it up
and I watched the color drain from his face. The picture showed us, sitting exactly where we were in that moment. His couch, his living room, the box at our feet, the USB cable dangling from his laptop. Only, in the photo, our eyes were blacked out. I felt the room tilt, the air thick with something unseen pressing down. If you've ever ordered something from the deep web, check your mail. Because the package wasn't just for me. And when we tried to destroy the evidence, that's when everything spiraled. Mark was the one who said it first. Burn it. All of it, tonight. I didn't even argue. The weight of that Polaroid, that impossible photo of us, had already poisoned the air. So we gathered the artifacts like evidence bags from a crime scene, the warped VHS tape, the USB stick, the Polaroids, and the phone that pulsed quietly like a heartbeat. We shoved it all back into the box. It felt heavier now, like it didn't want to leave. We dragged the box out behind his garage to a patch of gravel where he kept a rusty fire pit. The night was damp, stars drowned by cloud cover, the kind of night where the air tastes like static. Mark doused the box with lighter fluid. His hand trembled as he struck the match. For a second, flame caught. Hungry orange tongues licked the cardboard, curling it black. Relief flickered through me, but then, just like that, the fire died. No smoke, no embers, just nothing. Mark muttered, "That's not possible," and struck another match. Same result. The flames hissed out like someone had smothered them with invisible hands. The VHS tape rolled out of the box, unburned, the plastic looking somehow cleaner than before. I backed away. It doesn't want to go. Mark tried smashing the tape with the hammer. Plastic cracked, reel spilled. For a moment, I thought maybe finally we'd broken something. But when I turned back, the tape was whole again, sitting on the gravel, rewound, waiting. He swore and threw it into the dark. I wanted to run after it to make sure it was gone, but then I saw the USB dangling from the strap of my backpack. I hadn't put it there. My throat closed. "Mark, it followed me." He stared at the drive swinging in the moonlight, color draining from his face. "That's not..." He cut himself off, voice cracking. "That's not right." The flip phone buzzed inside the box. Its dim green screen glowed through the cardboard steady as a beacon. That was when something in me snapped. I laughed. Not nervous laughter, real, belly-shaking, breathless hysteria. The kind of laughter you hear from patients who know the surgery won't work. Mark grabbed my shoulders. "Hey, stop! Get a grip!" But I couldn't. My mind raced circles around itself, screaming, "It can't be burned. It can't be broken. It wants us." I bent double, wheezing, tears streaming down my face. The night echoed with it, half laugh, half sob, like some cruel mockery of joy. Then everything went silent. I don't mean quiet. I mean silent. No bugs, no breeze, no distant hum of cars, like the world had hit mute. And in that suffocating stillness, knock. 3 taps, slow, deliberate, at the front door of Mark's house. I froze mid-laugh, mouth hanging open, soundless. Mark's eyes went wide, reflecting the pale porch light like a terrified animal. I whispered, "No one knows I'm here." Knock. Again. He whispered back, voice breaking, "Then who the hell does?" I never went back to my apartment. I couldn't. After the knock at Mark's door, I knew running wouldn't matter. Whatever this was, it had found me before. It would find me again. So I decided on one thing. If this was my last night, I was going to document it. Every second. Mark begged me to stay, but I couldn't put him in more danger. I left his house around midnight and returned to my place like a condemned man walking back to his cell. The air outside was heavy, thick. Even the street lamps buzzed faintly, as if they were straining under some unseen pressure. Inside, I locked the door. Every bolt, every chain. I shoved furniture against the entryway, nailed the windows shut. Then I set up my phone on record, my laptop webcam, even Mark's GoPro. 3 different angles, 3 different fail-safes. If I disappeared, I wanted someone to know. The package sat in the middle of the floor, half burned yet whole, like it had been waiting for me. The flip phone buzzed once, twice. I ignored it. Then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, like someone muttering on the floor above me. But I live alone, and I don't have an upstairs. I grabbed a kitchen knife and sat with my back to the wall. Hours passed. The whispers grew louder, circling me, crawling along the edges of the room like static. Every time I blinked, the objects moved. The VHS tape migrated from the box to the couch. The polaroids spilled themselves across the floor. The USB stuck itself in my laptop port. I hadn't touched any of it. Then childlike laughter, distorted, warped, as though it were being played backward. I spun toward the sound, and that's when I saw it. A shadow at the window. Not outside, in the glass, like it was behind the pane, but not in the yard. The outline of a person with elongated limbs, shoulders hunched like a broken marionette. 2 glowing orbs stared back at me, too bright, too white, eyes that weren't human. My heart stopped. My skin crawled. The laughter sharpened, echoing through the apartment. The shadow cocked its head at me, twitching unnaturally, as if it were studying me. I dropped the knife. I knew it was useless. That was when I remembered you. I turned to the camera, forcing my voice steady. If you're hearing this, please listen. Maybe you can stop it. Maybe you can burn the listing before someone else finds it. There's a site. There's always a site. Packages like this don't just appear. They're circulated, traded, passed down like some cursed heirloom. The phone rang again. I ignored it, staring into the camera. This isn't about me anymore. If you're watching, it already knows you exist. That's the trick. That's the joke. Curiosity is the invitation. I tried to laugh, but it cracked into a sob. Something moved behind me. I whipped around too late. The shadow was inside now, standing by the package, its body bent and unfolded like a film glitch. I swear I could smell burning plastic mixed with rot. It reached down and plucked one of the Polaroids off the floor. Slowly, it turned it toward me. My breath caught. The photo was of me, sitting exactly as I was now, knife dropped, camera rolling, mouth open in shock. I scrambled for the camera, desperate. You have to destroy it before it finds you, please. Just... The phone rang one final time. I answered. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped it. The toy-like voice whispered, clear and close as if it were right against my ear.
Found you. The screen went black.